everyone. Today we turn to chapter 24 of the book of Genesis. To recap, we have been following Abraham, the patriarch of Israel, when he sacrificed his son Ishmael to the desert at his wife Sarah's behest and with God's support, and his almost sacrifice by his own hand of his beloved son Isaac. Here, though, in chapter 24, Isaac is very much alive, and he has grown up. He has grown up to the point where it is now time for him to take a wife. Now, if we remember, Abraham was quite old, past the point of being able to sire children when he not only sired Ishmael and then Isaac by his wife. So, at this point in the story, let's guess that Isaac is around the age of 15. Abraham is going to very soon be dead. He knows his time is coming. He knows he must wrap up his affairs. He knows that his beloved son Isaac, the only son who is now living with him, the son that will create his legacy, he knows that his son, needs a wife and needs to create that legacy. But Isaac does not go out and find a wife for himself. He doesn't go on a popular dating app. He doesn't talk to his friends and say, hey, could you set me up with that pretty girl over there by that well? Instead, Abraham arranges it for him. And this is the story. When we begin at Genesis chapter 24, 45, an unnamed servant is recounting how he met Rebekah, Isaac's future wife. And so we have the story from his point of view. Before I had finished speaking in my heart, the servant recounts. So he's pondering to himself what he should do, what is next. We know from previously in the story, he's been told to go find Isaac a wife, which I imagine for any servant might be a little difficult. Isaac is his master's son. Isaac is his future master. He kind of has to get this right. And they live in a desert, in the middle of nowhere. Yes, there are people in tents, with little communities and tribes and that sort of thing, but connecting with people is rather difficult. Finding the perfect wife who will be mother, a matriarch, everything that Isaac wants and needs is virtually impossible in this sort of setting when all this servant has is Abraham's words and God's voice to guide him. So before this servant had finished speaking in his heart, there was Rebekah coming out with her water jar on her shoulder. I'm going to pause there. We as Christians know this sort of story. We know from Jesus what it's like for a man to be lost in the middle of nowhere or outside of a settlement, needing water, and having a woman appear to him. This, in ancient Mesopotamia, is a courtship ritual, a ritual we have seen move throughout the Old Testament into the New Testament, into first century Palestine, where Jesus subverted it subtly. But this here is the original. So we have Rebekah, whose name at this point in the story, when it was happening, the servant did not know. And she's coming out with her water jar on her shoulder. This would be customary, easiest way to carry, put it on your shoulder. For a young woman to do this shows many things in ancient Mesopotamia. It shows that she is providing for her family. It shows that she is industrious. It shows, with her future actions, that she is kind and able to provide and is hospitable. These are all qualities a man in ancient Mesopotamia would want in a wife. So the servant is there pondering in his heart, and Rebekah comes forward with a jug on her shoulder for water. And Rebekah went down to the spring and drew water. She doesn't engage with him. She just goes and does what she is supposed to do. Rebekah is modest. This would have been attractive in ancient Mesopotamia. To continue, I, the servant, said to her, "Please let me drink." A basic response. Water is life in this culture. They live in a desert. They live where, if you do not plan where your water is coming from every single day, you could very well dehydrate and die, even near an oasis. Water is the most precious thing to them. Water is life. Water is renewal. And water here is part of hospitality. Verse 46. Rebecca quickly let down her jar from her shoulder. So she's listening, she's attentive, she's seeing to this servant's needs. And Rebecca said, "Drink, and I will also water your camels." Well, basically, with that one line, Rebecca has checked off all the boxes that the servant has in his head. She's kind. We can assume she's pretty, but that doesn't really matter here. She's young. She's providing for this servant. He's a servant, so he is beneath her socially, and still she is kind. Still she is hospitable. And she goes so far as to go and water the camels. Remember, she has come out here to this well with her water jar to supply water to her own household. But she is taking time out for this unknown man, this unknown servant, and however many camels he has with him. To continue. So I, the servant, drank. He's accepting her hospitality. And she, Rebecca, also watered the camels. They've had an exchange of words, and now they have an exchange of deeds. Hospitality is being given and received. And a courtship ritual is beginning between the servant on behalf of the unknown master to her and the young woman, Rebecca. Verse 47. Then I, the servant, asked her, "Whose daughter are you?" So we're continuing this courtship ritual. Everything's going well. The interaction, perfect. She's checking off those boxes, as I said. But, he has no idea who this girl is. She could be anyone. He can tell vaguely, probably by her clothing and how she handles herself, what type of family she's from. But what really matters is her name. What really matters is who she comes from, who her father is, who her grandfather is, and back and back and back. This is a civilization of lineage. So when he's asking her this, the servant is showing not only that he is attentive, that he wants to know her, but that he is serious with this courtship. And continuing, Rebecca said, "The daughter of Bethuel, Nahor's son, whom Milcah bore to him." This to us, 5,000-6,000 years later, really doesn't mean much of anything. These names, they're not the names that we memorize in Sunday school as recorded in the Bible. This is her genealogy, though. This is basically her passport. It would be like me, Averill, saying, and let me get this right, I am the daughter of Stephen, that's my dad, James's son, that's my grandfather, whom Susan bore to him. I'm basically, when she adds who her mother is, she's showing that she is existing, that this culture is a culture of many wives and of concubines. We saw this earlier with Abraham. Abraham had his wife Sarah and also had a son by Sarah's servant Hagar. So she's putting up her genealogy. And, well, the servant is clearly pleased, because what does he do next? And I quote, continuing with verse 47, "So I, the servant, put the ring on her nose and the bracelets on her arms." This is completing the ritual. She is given hospitality. He has accepted it. He has asked her name and her people. She has told him. And now he's showing that, yes, she is the girl for his master. Basically, in modern culture, if you are traditional, when you like a girl, theoretically, you give her flowers and you give her chocolates. But when you know she is the girl for you, you give her a diamond engagement ring. After all, diamonds are a girl's best friend. So when he gives her a ring for her nose and bracelets, he is giving her precious metals and is also adorning her. He is making her beautiful in their culture. He is elevating her status as future wife of his master's son. It's not quite finished there, however. The servant continues as he's telling his story in verse 48. Then I bowed my head and worshipped the Lord, and blessed the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who had led me by the right way to obtain the daughter of my master's kinsman for his son. Brief note, Rebecca here is identified as the daughter of my master's kinsman. Rebecca, therefore, is somehow related to Abraham. This would have been normal. Family tribes would have intermarried, cousins would have married. The connections are already there, which are being strengthened by marriage. But once this ritual is done, this servant is showing that he follows the God of Abraham. He follows his master's religion, and he gives thanks. He acknowledges that God has led him to the perfect wife for Isaac, and that it is God and God alone who is truly worthy and who deserves the credit. Amen. Today's sermon lesson is a story of lineage. And really, please don't quote me on this, it's just getting from point A to point B. We have Father Abraham, whom we know and love, and then we have Isaac, who frankly is a bit boring until his sons Esau and Jacob are born. Then we have Esau and Jacob, which hopefully will be coming later in the next couple of weeks. And through Jacob, the 12 sons of Jacob, who become the 12 tribes of Israel. But what can we learn from this story? Well, one, we are learning about ancient Mesopotamian courtship rituals, which of course is always interesting, especially when we see them repeated again and again throughout the Old Testament and into the New Testament. What else do we learn? Well, we learn that Abraham needs to provide for Isaac a wife to continue the lineage. He's getting up there in years. He's gray, he's old, he really probably should not have lived this long, and so this is the most important thing to him right now, providing for his son, and that means getting him a proper wife. But it's God who provides that wife. It is God who leads the servant to Rebekah. It is God ultimately who chooses the mother of Jacob and the mother, in many ways, of the 12 tribes of Israel, which created the entire Jewish people. And that's the lesson we need to take out from this Bible lesson. God does provide. We usually do not see it. And when we do see it, we refuse to recognize it. Speaking as a singleton, it would be great if God just, provided me with a future husband wrapped up on a platter. But unfortunately, that is not how it works. God is much more subtle than that these days. We live in a highly complex world. We live in a time where there are health issues, where people are talking about oppression and racism, where we're going into a national election, and many people are afraid of what is going to happen. And through all of this, many of us are losing our jobs or our hours are being cut. And we're just trying to figure out how to survive from one day to the next. And this story, while beautiful, just teaches us that when we are least expecting it, or perhaps when we need it most, God will provide. Now, we don't really see Isaac in this part of the story, but I'm sure if Isaac had sat down in the desert, near his father's tent, underneath a tree perhaps, and had conjured in his mind what he needed the most, it most likely would not have been Rebecca, his future wife. But God knew. God saw. God understood the entire problem. And he provided. And so too, perhaps, will God provide for us in these days, and most specifically for you. Stay healthy, stay safe, and God bless you and yours today and every day to come. Amen.